Good afternoon. Welcome to the September 10, 2019 Glendale Housing Authority meeting being called to order at 3:08 p.m. May I please have the roll call?
Authority Member Devine.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Parazian. Quintero.
Here.
Garpetian.
Here.
Chair Agajanian.
Present. May I please have your report?
The agenda for the September 10th, 2019 regular meeting of the Glendale Housing Authority was posted on Thursday, September 5th, 2019 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
What's next, please?
4, approval of minutes. 4A, minutes of the regular Housing Authority meeting of August 27, 2019.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Hearing no objection, the minutes stand approved as submitted. What's next, please?
5 would be oral communications. There are no cards submitted.
Oral communications is closed. What's next, please?
6, business agenda. 6A, Director of Community Service and Parks, regarding submission of the Glendale Homeless Continuum of Care COC funding application to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development under the 2019 COC program competition and the City of Glendale's 2019 Homeless Point in Time Count Report. A1, motion approving the 2019 COC program priorities and authorizing the submission of a grant application to HUD on behalf of the Glendale Homeless COC under 2019 COC program competition as recommended by the COC board, and authorizing the city manager to execute all agreements, certifications, and documents necessary to accept and implement the funds. 2, motion to note and file the report.
Please, who's representing? Oh,
Yes.
City manager, please.
Yes, Chair Agajanian, members of the Housing Authority, we will go directly to Yvette Samvelian, who is our Community Services Manager overseeing our continuum of care and homeless programs. With that, Yvette.
Thank you, Chair Agajanian, members of the Housing Authority, City Manager, and staff. Today, we are here before you to ask Housing Authority to review and get a report on our Glendale Continuum of Care funding application to the Housing Urban Development. Since 1996, the Glendale Continuum of Care has been receiving about $58 million of homeless services funding to support various aspects of the homeless programming, which includes from street outreach to case management to housing services, housing subsidies, and mental health substance abuse services. With that, the application requirement for the federal government focuses on several priorities, which is permanent supportive housing for chronically homeless individuals and families, rapid rehousing, which are short-term funding assistance, again, street outreach, coordinated entry system, homeless prevention, and emergency shelter programming. Part of the Glendale Continuum of Care fundamental components, we currently have 155 units of homeless housing in the city of Glendale with about 45 landlords. The street outreach component, part of this funding, supports around 234 unduplicated persons. And our coordinated entry system, which is Essentia, provides around about over 1,000 or so unduplicated clients through services. We have several transitional housing programs and rapid rehousing programs of about 70 households go through the services within the Glendale Continuum of Care. Homeless prevention programs serve about 180 households annually to prevent homelessness within this funding application. And we have 2 year-round emergency shelter. One is operated through Essentia, which is a 60 to 90-day emergency shelter that serves 45 households or beds. And then YWCA of Glendale serves domestic violence families or women fleeing from domestic violence through their shelter programming. Currently, with the City of Glendale and our coordinated entry system, HUD requires us to prioritize all of our applicants, folks that are experiencing homelessness, to go through an intake and assessment process. So there is a little flow chart here that says outreach and CES. But what that means is that anytime there's a homeless person in this community, outreach is called first and foremost, which to provide the first service, and folks are triaged through various different types of resources. The ultimate goal is to get people into market rent housing, permanent housing, subsidized rental housing such as Section 8 or any other affordable housing, even reconnection or reunification with family and friends. We do have to follow a prioritization criteria, but the quick summary of that is basically those who are most vulnerable on the streets get top priority for our available permanent supportive housing vouchers. The continuum of care and the committee is comprised of all of our nonprofits and mainstream resources. Our board of directors are elected by our continuum of care members. Today we have Bruce Nelson, our board member here present in the event there are some questions for our board. The board members meet to review and evaluate all of the funding applications. The continuum of care application availability is about $2.5 million for this fiscal year. Part of this project application, we did issue the proposals and had nonprofits apply for the funding, were interviewed by the board members. What's unique about this year, which is similar to as last year, HUD, our funder, requires that our project get ranked in Tier 1 and Tier 2. And what that means, of the $2.5 million, only $2.2 million of funding sources can be top priority. Anything that goes in funding Tier 2 are the lowest priority, or those projects that are not at full capacity or expending their dollars. And specifically for that, I will go into the details of that with regards to the project eligibility. We currently have 13 projects. 12 of them are renewal projects, and we will be applying for one new continuum of care planning project and one new permanent supportive housing project. The new permanent supportive housing project will serve about 5 unduplicated chronically homeless individuals with ongoing rental subsidy and case management. But I'd like to bring to your attention that the 2 projects, or a portion of 2 funding sources, have been ranked in Tier 2, and that one of them is Chester Street Permanent Supportive Housing that is operated by the Salvation Army. We have staff from Salvation Army here today. The board also coordinated and recommended to rank a portion of our coordinated entry project, which is all the case management and outreach team provided through Essentia, around $61,000 or so, be ranked in Tier 2. If the continuum is not successful enough to receive the full $2.5 million, these 2 projects will be cut from the continuum of care funding awards. And there is a transition in place for the Chester Street Permanent Supportive Housing, which is funded by our home department of the community development, and the families will remain in their housing with the home requirements. Basically, the fiscal impact for our continuum will be $2.5 million. Part of the requirements is for our agencies to also provide cash dollars to support these projects, and it totals around $650,000 in order for them to even qualify and receive these fundings. Once we get approval and submission and are conditionally awarded, we will return back to Council on Housing Authority to get those funds awarded and appropriate to the agencies. Part of today's presentation includes our request for Housing Authority staff to note and file our 2019 homeless point-in-time count. The 2019 homeless count is required by the federal government. We do this every year in the last couple of days of January. This is a cooperative effort with our Glendale Police Department outreach, nonprofits. Both sheltered and unsheltered folks are counted in this survey. We go out and count folks to get idea of what's the need in this community. With regards to our overall results, we did see a 6.5% decrease in the overall homeless population this year compared to 2018. With regards to our folks, there are some key findings that I'll just quickly touch upon due to the timing of the presentation, but we did identify that our unsheltered population decreased slightly, and those are the reasons with outreach efforts, working with our homeless clients that are on the streets and getting them into housing, and then provide all of the homeless services after they're placed. Specifically, we did see new families coming into homelessness that are chronically homeless in this community recently, and some of the subpopulation decreases this year compared to last year. We did see a decrease in our HIV/AIDS subpopulation. Our chronic substance abuse folks, percent of those identifying to have substance abuse or mentally ill also decreased. So the focus is to get those who are in the severe diagnosis and get them housing first, and that's where the high vulnerability comes into place. Again, veterans were less last year than the previous fiscal year. We have some funding for vouchers for veterans and continue to work through prioritizing veterans in permanent housing. Few of the factors, just to note, even though we had an overall decrease in the homelessness in the community, our count reported that we have few folks coming into as first-time homeless that became homeless for the first time due to rent burden. Some were because of employment losses or unable to increase their employment, and few due to illnesses in unexpected illnesses. And so with these factors in mind, we have several recommendations that we will go through working with our Continuum of Care Board and the agencies is to continue to seek out additional funding through potentially Measure H, Measure S. The City of Glendale did receive funding for HEAP and CASH, and those programs are ready and begun implementation July 1st. And so those folks that are first-time homeless or most of the HEAP and CASH funding will be allocated for prevention services. Continue to work with eliminating homelessness among the unsheltered veterans population and work through developing additional housing resources, coordinating with our community policing department for the mental health outreach, and provide additional housing for folks that are living with AIDS or HIV virus. So again, this application is a collaborative effort with our Continuum of Care partners, the nonprofits that execute all the services. The funding serves around 2,400 unduplicated homeless persons throughout the year. And so we're here, staff is here before you to ask your approval for the submission of the application to the federal government, which is due on or before September 30th, and note and file our 2019 homeless count results. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer them for you now.
First ask on the, I don't know, this is page 17, I guess, that you mentioned that we have 243 unduplicated homeless persons, and that shows 6.5% decrease. We know everything today is more expensive than year before, and so people, they're having more hard time to find a place to be and to take care of themselves. Why you think is we have less homeless this year than rather last year? If you can answer.
Chair Agajanian, members of the Housing Authority, the focus last year was to work with our unsheltered population, the visible homeless that are on our streets in the parks. So what we did is we focused on our unsheltered population to get them into housing. And I know about 12 or so folks that are daily in and out of our hospitals, jail, and emergency rooms that continue to seek the services. So we focused on the unsheltered. The priority now will be to continue to work to prevent homelessness for those experiencing first-time homeless and continue to move those in emergency shelters into alternate housing with this new HEAP and CASH funding sources. But we do get different priorities, and we focus on that to try to work through obviously reducing and at some point eliminating homelessness in the community.
Okay, thank you. Is there any question?
Oh,
go ahead.
oh, okay. I was, now I've forgotten what I was going to ask. Do you think that the police officers that we have that are trained in dealing with the mentally ill, do you think that's having some, I'm trying to think of the word, impact on the numbers, things?
Yes, Housing Authority Divine, absolutely. The Glendale Homeless Outreach Team through the Police Department and the Glendale Mental Health Outreach Team from our Police Department has been an invaluable addition to our homeless services, because our outreach team from Ascensia and the PD officers go out and talk to the clients together, and it's a cohesive team where one can sort of offer services, the other one can look at their mental health status and figure out together what's the best option, and that has been the tremendous possible outcomes for us to be able to get folks into housing, because the interaction with our police officers and our outreach teams.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Also, in the report on emergency shelters, you mentioned that approximately 55% of the 404 clients that have been involved in emergency shelters are placed in rapid rehousing, transitional housing, and permanent housing. What happens to the other 45%?
Housing Authority Divine, yes. The other population, unfortunately, some of them do recycle through the emergency shelter programming or fall out of the system. But our goal now is, because we have the new HEAP and cash funding that came available in July, is to connect those families into quick, rapid rehousing and financial assistance programs. Unfortunately, due to lack of available units or vouchers to support, Glendale still has a successful rates of getting folks into housing and maintaining the housing for the participants. But with these new additional dollars, with Measure H, HEAP, and cash, the goal is to move everyone into all the available resources.
Well, I just want to say that I think we should be really grateful and proud of the work that all of you are doing to see a decline. Is really an amazing and wonderful, actually, statistic. Since I was just at SCAG, and they were talking about how LA has gone up like 11%, and then I'm looking at this and it says we're down 6.5%. Do you see a lot of LA homeless coming our way?
So around 30% of our participants are from Glendale in terms of our unsheltered. Homelessness is a regional challenge, so folks go around anywhere there's resources. And so we do see some portion of folks coming from near community, including LA. But we try, being part of SPA 2 and Glendale having its own continuum, we continue to provide services and make referrals as appropriate for all of the clients experiencing homelessness.
Thank you. Fabulous. Thank you.
Member Mayor Nanturian.
Thank you. So do we have a daily outreach team or a nightly outreach team that goes out to talk to the homeless?
Yes, we do have daily outreach offered from Ascensia from Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to about 4 p.m. We also have daily outreach from our Glendale Police Department that's available, I believe, from 6:30 to about 6 p.m. at night in the evening. Unfortunately, we don't have outreach for evening hours or evening shifts on weekends at this moment.
So is it complaint-driven, or are they out cruising the streets and they see someone and talk to them?
So typically outreach do go out in the community, but every day there's requests of outreach for us to be able to send out deploy our teams. And so if there's a complaint related or someone sees a client, we send out to deal with the appropriate situation. Otherwise, we have 2 full-time outreach officers from PD and then 2 full-time outreach staff from Ascensia that are out in the community on a daily basis.
Okay, so we have 200, our last count was 243 homeless. 90 of those or so were sheltered. So out of the unsheltered, let's say the 150 or so, how many of those would we classify as resistant to assistance?
That's a great question. Of the unsheltered population, I would say maybe 10% are service resistant. I think the challenge is that their mental illness or use of drugs sometimes forbids them to access resources, and gaining that trust and rapport takes time. And we've had those scenarios in Glendale. We continue to provide outreach and ongoing case management on the street until they're ready for the services. But we also look for having those housing options to connect them with and have everything set up so when we are providing the outreach and services, we can get them quickly connected to resources.
So if we had more housing availability, would that number of 150 unsheltered drop?
Absolutely.
So that's at least by up to 90%. You said 10% are resistant. And in the executive summary, you're talking about the reasons for homelessness. And you discuss rent increase, loss of employment, and unexpected illness.
Yes.
And I think that adds up to 100%. But is there not, and should there not be, a mental illness category or a substance abuse cause for homelessness?
So,
Or does that come after they're homeless?
yeah, so the question when we asked folks how did they become homeless, those were the top priorities in terms of the folks that we experienced homelessness for the first time this year. We do have all the subpopulation, about 14% that I went through with regards to our data. About 14% represent our mental health population. About another 14% represent our substance abusers. About 17% represent our disabled folks with regards to those disabilities. I'm trying to find that slide here somewhere, but homelessness has many factors to it, and the mental health and substance abuse is additional challenge for them who experience homelessness.
Now, you also said that additional resource, the question was, are they from Glendale or are they from out? That additional resources can draw in homeless.
So
The question was, are they all from Glendale? No, they're not all from Glendale. Some come from out of the city because they're drawn by the resources. So how do we deal with that? Should we look at this as a city issue or a regional issue? As a city issue, what you're telling me is if we create more services and resources, we're going to attract more homeless. That's not so good maybe on a city level if we're trying to rid our streets of homeless or give everyone currently here shelter. From a regional aspect, maybe it's good because it's just, it's more services for the greater population. So, I mean, it's an interesting paradox that we face, not just we, but I think any municipality faces, and how much can you do and how much will that help in cleaning up, and it's not really cleaning up, but providing services to the current snapshot of homeless in your city.
And we also, I mean, as Yvette's kind of putting her thoughts together, and she's the expert, what we've also heard throughout the years is that we are a safe city. And folks who are in the homeless community talk and will oftentimes go to places that are safe. So outside of the service piece of it, in terms of that continuum of care and allowing the individuals to receive services that are available to them in this community, they feel safe at night when they are sleeping in this community. And so I've heard that for as long as I've been here at the city, and when I worked at the library in terms of the issues we dealt with at the Central Library. And so I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
that's exactly what I was going to say, that people feel safe in this community and they're here. And we continue to prioritize folks that are here, as in all of our vouchers and financial assistance, as top priority. And then we continue to serve others as resources are available.
Thank you.
Council members, any question? Any question? Garfield, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do we know how many of our homeless population are actually from Glendale? They were Glendale born?
Yes. So from our homeless count, we identified 31% of those folks that became homeless for the first time this year are from Glendale. And of the 31%, we have about 22% who lived in Glendale, 36% worked in Glendale. About 30% of those attended school in Glendale, so they've lived their life in Glendale and for various reasons recently experienced homelessness. But in general, around 33% of our population are all from the city of Glendale.
And are they more like individuals or they are families?
Both individuals and families.
And Essentia, how many people do they serve on an annual basis?
So Essentia has various programs that is funded through this continuum of care. Through their coordinated entry system, which is all the case management services, the mental health outreach, housing navigators, employment navigators, they serve around about 15 unduplicated homeless persons, or over 1,000 people that come through the intake center, and then they get assigned to specialized specialized case managers to provide the services. They also operate several housing projects in the continuum, and so the Glendale Housing, the Housing Now project serves 14 units of housing for chronically homeless individuals and families. The scattered site serves around 12 units of families, and the next step serves about 8 units of individuals who are substance abuse recovery. And so overall, through their also emergency shelter program, they serve around 200 people, and their outreach serves about anywhere from 200 unduplicated persons and 1,000 contacts in the city of Glendale during the year. So they have various components and serve different subpopulations.
And in LA County, I mean, homelessness is a regional issue, and what percentage, I think Councilmember Devine mentioned 11% increase in the county overall, or it's less or more?
It's around 11% for LA County, yes.
And are we seeing any results, positive results from passing Measure H? LA has its own HHH measures that they pass, but are we seeing any results from Measure H? Regional-wise, I mean, just not Glendale, but overall.
Let me speak quickly about Glendale, and then maybe I can comment about regional. With Measure H funding, this is our second year of receiving the funding. We have been able to work through addition of an extra outreach person through Essentia, and therefore we have the second full-time position that continues to provide outreach. We also have housing subsidies, rapid rehousing subsidies that are serving the individuals in this community. So yes, we're seeing a great impact, and we'll continue to seek those programs. As it relates to regional, there has been a lot of services out there through Measure H, but again, in LA, there have been challenges dealing with a lot of the first-time homeless again, and so it's difficult to get to the details of their performance at this moment. But there are reports, and I can come back to you in the future for updates on Measure H only.
If you, in the future, if you can bring a report as to how many units are being built through Measure H, that would be great. That was part of our recommendation number 2. I think the supervisors, they're in talks of renegotiating the way they allocate funds to different cities because, as you know, our share was like we contributed about $10 million, and we received $300,000 back. And I understand their position, but I think they are revisiting that issue. So we have to be very active on that and proactive, so we can get our fair share of those fundings. All of your recommendations, they're all great. I think number 5, it stands out one of the most important ones. I don't want to say the most important one. That is the zero tolerance policy for children living on the streets. I think that's something that, as a father, I cannot bear. So I think that's something that we really need to pay a lot of attention to. And one quick question on page number 2. The slide is up. Is this the funding? Is it total funding that we're receiving from different sources? That $2.3 million. Can you just educate me on these numbers one more time?
Sure. So the $2.5 million is the continuum of care, which is this application we apply for annually. The $60,000 is from the Community Development Block Grant. It's the competitive process through that process. It serves some of the homeless agencies. The Emergency Solutions Grant funding only serves or provides funding for emergency shelter and prevention, and that's also entitlement through the CDBG block grant. HEAP Cash was our first time applying this fiscal year, and we received those fundings. It primarily will provide financial assistance, homeless prevention, and rapid rehousing for HEAP and Cash. Also a program with our local hospital, Glendale Adventist, for discharge planning and coordination of our homeless who are being discharged to services. And Measure H will continue to provide the outreach services and rapid rehousing component. So the HEAP and CARES are brand new funding this fiscal year. The 2.5 is ongoing. CDBG and ESG is a competitive process that agencies apply and receive funding.
Okay. No, on page 12, when it says Shelter Plus Care Project, is this a project done by Essentia, or is this project in Glendale? Can you just tell me what that is?
Yes,
There's 1999, 2005, and 2001.
So the Glendale Housing Authority is the lead applicant for the Shelter Plus Care project, and I can explain that. Basically, we provide rental subsidies similar to the Section 8 program for chronically homeless individuals. The funds directly go to landlords for rental support. Essentia does provide the case management, and they leverage that resources for us with regards to the Shelter Plus Care projects, and also they commit to provide the cash match along with Salvation Army and Catholic Charities for these projects, since we don't have matching funds to support them. And right now we have about 50 units of housing with the various projects, and continue to increase between 3 and 5 every year as in new vouchers for our continuum of care.
Besides the 41-bed or 42-bed transitional housing, or the housing that we have through Essentia, we have 52 units that we have vouchers for through, okay.
That's correct.
That's not bad. That's good.
So
Not
we have
enough
about-
though, but
Total of 155 units with various subsidies and housing units in the continuum for homeless persons.
got it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, council members. I have, a little bit earlier, you said 31%, I want to make sure I heard it right, 31% they became homeless this year. These, on top of what we had last year, homeless people, we had homeless people last year too.
Chair Agajanian, the 31% were the first time they became homeless in the city of Glendale during this needs assessment process. So these are first-time homeless families or individuals experiencing homelessness due to the various reasons that we had identified.
Okay. On page 20 of the report, and ironically, this brief report also is page 20. So whichever you want to go, it's fine with me. So it says in 2018, 11% total sheltered persons, and this year, 2019, 28% total sheltered persons. So what happened that we got the chance to have more people sheltered? What has been changed from last year to this year? Yes, this is the, yeah.
Yeah. Chair Agajanian, members of the Housing Authority, in 2018, Essentia was operating a 40-bed emergency shelter, and then in 2019, they increased their beds to 45 beds of emergency shelter through expanded funding from Measure H. So there were additional beds added to our emergency program, as well as in 2019, we had YWCA increasing their beds from 10 beds any point in time to 13 beds. Even though their small number of beds extended, folks come in and exit quickly. That gives an opportunity for someone else to get the available beds. So there was increases in our emergency shelter beds this fiscal year to accommodate the need.
How you pick up the person to become sheltered person? What's the criteria to say, because we say only 28% has been sheltered, right? Mm-hmm. So the rest are not sheltered, they're on the street. So what's the criteria? Who gets the chance to be sheltered?
So with Essentia's emergency shelter program, folks that are ready to enter the program are those who are experiencing homelessness. They may or may not have mental illness. If they have a current substance abuse challenge, they will not be able to enter the shelter program, again, because we have children in the program, families and children in the emergency shelter program. With the YWCA, these are folks that are fleeing domestic violence, and so those individuals experiencing domestic violence are entered with the YWCA shelters. Everybody else is either unsheltered, or we work with them from the streets to rapid rehousing or even permanent housing as alternate housing options because not everyone is qualified for all of the available resources that we have available. And these are the regulations we follow through that's led by our funders.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the report. Are there any authority member or staff comments?
Good job. Excellent.
Thank you. I have a motion to adjourn.
I'll move the item at 6A.
6A 1 and 2.
And 2.
All right, so
Thank
6A
you.
1 and 2.
Second.
roll call.
Authority Member Devine,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Barazian, Quintero,
Yes.
Garpetian,
Yes.
Chair Agajanian.
Yes. So
you.
I have a motion to adjourn. Are we done? But both items? Or we have more?
I
We
think there's
actually
an
have-
informational item.
We have an informational item, Chair Agajanian, under staff comments, member
Staff
council
comments.
comments and staff
Okay.
comments. If we can ask Mr. Zovak to come up and give you a brief on something that was discovered this past week.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the Housing Authority. The city manager mentioned staff had requested this time to meet and update you on an issue that has came up prior to the weekend with regards to Vista Grande Court and the application process, our assessment of that issue, and our feelings about moving forward and how best to do that. Just as a point of reminder, the Vista Grande application process, it's a process in which applications could be obtained and submitted from Tuesday, September 3rd through Monday, September 30th. Given our past projects, it's a very long timeline, one of the longest timelines to be able to pick up and submit an application that we've had in the past. Applications are to be mailed or emailed to the developer. The mailing address is 1125 East Broadway, number 483, and then the email address is vistagrande@nationalcore.org. So last week, the application process kicked off, and it kicked off beginning, let me just advance this slide here. Last week, the application process kicked off. It began on Tuesday, September 3rd, and what we discovered was discovered on Friday, September 6th. So 3 days into the application process, it was discovered that the incorrect P.O. box address was listed on the flyer that accompanied each application. So staff has, since Friday, been talking with the developer about what took place, how it took place, and then looking at ways that how it could be mitigated, if at all, and move forward with the application process. We did speak with the developer, and since that issue was discovered on Friday, all advertisements, all flyers, all websites were corrected on Friday, September 6th, to reflect the correct P.O. box address to be used for submitting an application. We met on Friday and again yesterday with the Glendale Post Office, and they've agreed to hold all mail addressed to the incorrect post office box, and reached agreement in that the developer will pick up mail delivered to the post office at the incorrect P.O. box on a daily basis, Monday through Saturday from the post office, and they will process all those applications that are received. Something new that wasn't planned in the original process was that the developer will now mail to all applications that are received, both to the correct and or incorrect post office box, an application confirmation receipt. And we felt that that was important as word gets out that there was initially this wrong P.O. box attached to the application process. Anxiety will get up. And so we had instructed the developer, and again, they have agreed to mail a receipt of application to everybody, to do that on almost a daily basis so that people understand, oh, my application was received. I could rest assured that it's going to be processed. It's interesting to note that once we found out that and have corrected the P.O. box, new applications or additional applications have been received already at the corrected P.O. box. So we've seen that shift to the correct P.O. box happening, and that's encouraging to us. What we've also looked at is that, and encourage people to do so who are worried, applicants can call the 818 number that's been listed on the flyer from the very beginning, and they could inquire with developer staff and verify that their application was received. If an applicant is uncertain about whether an application was mailed correctly, we're always going to inform them they can always resubmit with no adverse impact to the fact that they're submitting 2 applications. It's simply to correct a mistake that was made by the developer. The developer has confirmed that they will hire additional staff to answer phone inquiries. We think that once the community starts to hear a little bit about the P.O. box, there'll be an uptick in calls. So we wanted to make sure the developer and see how committed the developer was in being able to receive those calls on a timely basis. And so much so that they said they will hire additional staff to help with answering phones. And then we were able to secure that the developer will hire staff, additional staff, to help disperse applications at 2 locations, since Tuesday has received quite a bit of activity in terms of people going in to pick up the applications. That's the Adult Recreation Center and the Armenian Relief Society. I think it's interesting or important to also note that with this long application process and with the demand that we were expecting, the advertising was being rolled out in phases. So if you recall, part of the application and marketing process was to mail this availability to everyone on our Section 8 waiting list and affordable housing interest list. We were able to stop that in time. Those mailings did not go out. They've been corrected and just waiting for a go-ahead from staff to be able to issue those out. So there's no adverse impact to that group. They will be getting the correct mailing address mailed to them. Any of the newspapers advertisements that were published asked that people begin looking for their applications and obtaining their applications effective September 9th. So those applications and those people coming in as a result of those ads that they saw will have the correct address as well coming in. So given that and the security that we've received from the post office that they will continue to hold and give to the developer those applications that were coming into the wrong P.O. box, and the quick turnaround we've been seeing at the correct P.O. box, we feel that, and the additional time till September 30th for someone to be able to come in, we think that is enough to be able to mitigate this mistake that's been made and continue on with the application process. And just to give you a quick idea of what the issue was, I've provided this one slide highlighting the P.O. box information. And so originally it was just simply listed P.O. Box 483, when in reality it is not a post office P.O. box that was secured. It was a private P.O. box, one of the mailbox, et cetera's type of business that was secured. And in order for mail to go there correctly, the address of the actual store needs to be listed, then the P.O. box. And so that's what we had discovered, the mistake that the developer had made. That is my very quick update on that process.
Okay, Councilmember.
I have a question. This may be getting into the weeds, but it says that if if applicant is uncertain where application was mailed, they may resubmit with no adverse impact. Are you going to be like comparing if you get 2 applications, like what address they send it to, or does that not?
We could do that. I think ultimately we're just going to simply take a look at the totality of everything, and given this mistake, and give everyone the benefit of the doubt.
Okay, great. And my second question is CORE bearing the financial responsibility of this error as far as printing and paper,
Oh, yes.
et cetera, et cetera?
Oh, yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
I have a question. Let's assume somebody mails the application and left for somewhere. They are not here. And they don't hear this. And that application got lost. How we can prove the person comes back and he or she says, I made the application, then what's the remedy?
I think it goes back to what I had just answered. We need to give them the benefit of the doubt in situations like that. And as this application process continues, and if we receive more information and more facts are revealed, I think that would lead us to making decisions like that on down the line. It's important to note, again, that the application process extends out to September 30th. So that gives us and people a long window of time to be able to know if their application was received or not by this confirmation of receipt. We also have an appeal period built in at the end of the application process. Remember, after applications are all completed, the developer is inputting those applications into a database, and they're actually reviewing the applications. We will then be sending people information after September 30th, 1 to 2 weeks, maybe even 3 weeks after that, that your application was received. Unfortunately, you do not qualify for the program. You make more, or for the project, you make more than the stated income. Those people have 2 weeks to appeal that decision to us. So we are hoping that that September 30th deadline, that time it takes us to input applications and generate rejection or acceptance letters, a 2-week appeal period time will be enough time for someone in the situation that you described to come back and say, hey, I've never heard anything. And at that point, we will be dealing with them.
Okay. Yes. Councilmember Garfield. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Does a P.O. Box 483 exist?
A P.O. box at the post office does exist, numbered 483. So one of the other things that we looked at is acquiring that. It's in existence now with someone else. We are reaching out to that person just to, and let me back up and say, let me tell you what the post office is doing. The post office has told us that they've put a sign on that P.O. box with instructions to the mail carriers. This P.O. box can only receive this type of address. If it is addressed for National Corps, which is the developer, P.O. Box 483 at that zip code, do not stick it in this P.O. box, place it in this bin, special bin. It will be picked up by hand. So there is a P.O. Box 483 that exists. It's not something we can acquire, but it is something that has been flagged by the post office.
Okay, so do we know how many mails were diverted from that P.O. box into the one in East Broadway? How many of them were delivered and we captured them, or the
So let's see if I answer your question. We did ask for the developer for an update. So far electronically through their website submittal process, they've received about 380 submittals, applications thus far electronically. They've received about 80 applications to the correct P.O. box, and they were able to divert approximately 200 plus applications that were sent to the incorrect mailbox that the post office held for us.
So from the September 3rd to September 6th, they had 200 plus applications that were diverted to them, right?
That have been held, yes, and given to the staff and the developer.
And from 6th to today, there's only 80 applications that received with the correct address?
Correct.
So I believe we need to let the ARC and the ARS.
Oh, yeah, then they are aware.
They have to really contact anyone they know, whoever comes in, to let them know if you filled out an application, there was this issue. So they will redo their application. This is kind of unacceptable, to be honest with you. To me, it's a problem. And do we know how many applications were picked up from between ARS and ARC?
No, that's difficult to be able to estimate.
They're not
We know that the
numbered, right?
demand, typically on these, the first few days, the demand is very heavy, but not as heavy as we typically anticipate because of the fact that we held off on those direct mailers to really our core group of people that are just daily waiting for information from the city of Glendale. We expect that to, once those mailers go out, traffic at those locations will pick up again.
I think we need to have to put a process in place to not have this kind of stuff anymore. We need to control this whole thing from A to Z. I know that with the lottery is being done here, it's televised, it's very transparent, but as far as applications coming in, waiting out the applications, how these applications are being sent out, who checks or verifies the information on the application. I think we need to really, with all these new projects coming through,
the ones that we are hoping that we will do in the future, we don't want to have any issues, because we had some issues with S-121. It was resolved, but I think we need to really have a system in place that we won't have this kind of mistakes, because
That's agreed. With the acquisitions that we're in place with now and the future projects as a result of that, there needs to be a much more standardized process that I think could be as foolproof as possible moving forward. And we're preparing to look at that and then come back with recommendations. But your point about at those locations, maybe putting up a sign saying, if you submitted an application prior to this, please be aware of the address issue, that will be made available at those 4 locations as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Now, very carefully, I will ask, are there any authority member or staff comments?
Since you asked very carefully, there are no comments.
May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
We stand adjourned at 3:58 p.m. Thank you.